The library's fluorescent lights flickered as I shuffled through another stack of books, my fingers tracing the embossed titles with a practiced ennui. This was my life, an endless cycle of shelving, sorting, and silence. A once vibrant passion had withered into a hollow routine, and I often found myself staring blankly at the dusty tomes, wondering where it all went wrong. That was until the letter arrived. Kira Weston? The mailroom clerk thrust the crinkled envelope into my hands, his brow furrowed with confusion. This is addressed to you, but it looks, well, old. I studied the yellowed parchment, my heart skipping a beat at the unfamiliar handwriting. With trembling fingers, I tore it open, and a single sheet of paper fluttered to the floor. What is it? The clerk's voice was a distant echo as my eyes scanned the words that would forever alter the course of my life. I'm the sole heir to my great-aunt's estate. The clerk's eyes widened. You've got family money? I shook my head, my mind racing. I didn't even know I had a great-aunt. She lived in some coastal town called Ridgeview. Well, what are you waiting for? He clapped me on the shoulder, nearly knocking the wind out of me. Go claim your fortune. Easier said than done. The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal proceedings, and the dawning realization that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't begin to fathom. Before I knew it, I was standing on the doorstep of a dilapidated Victorian manor, the salty sea breeze whipping my hair across my face. The once grand estate had fallen into disrepair, its peeling paint and overgrown gardens a testament to years of neglect. You must be Miss Weston. I spun around to find a weathered man regarding me with a guarded expression. His calloused hands clutched a rusted set of keys. Mason Richards, he said, offering a curt nod. The caretaker. It's nice to meet you, I replied, my voice faltering as I took in the crumbling facade before me. This is a lot to take in. Mason's lips pressed into a thin line. Aye, the old girl's seen better days, but she's got good bones. As we stepped inside, the musty air enveloped us like a shroud, and the floorboards groaned beneath our feet. Shadows danced across the peeling wallpaper, and a sense of foreboding settled deep within my gut. Why did my great-aunt leave me this place? I asked, unable to shake the feeling that I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Mason's gaze was unreadable. Couldn't rightly say, miss, but I reckon you'll find out soon enough. His cryptic words hung in the stale air, and I couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay buried within these crumbling walls. Little did I know, the path ahead would test my resolve in ways I never could have imagined. The next few weeks were a blur of renovation chaos. Contractors swarmed the estate, their hammers and saws echoing through the hollow hallways. I watched as the peeling wallpaper was stripped away, revealing layers of neglect and disrepair. But it wasn't just the manor that needed restoration. The entire town seemed to harbor a deep-seated resentment toward my family's legacy. Best be careful, miss. Mason's gruff voice cut through the din of construction one afternoon. Folks round here ain't too keen on your kin. I frowned, wiping a bead of sweat from my brow. Why? What did my great-aunt do that was so terrible? Mason's steely gaze bore into me. Let's just say the Weston name ain't looked too kindly upon. Bad blood, you might call it. Before I could press further, the foreman barked orders, and Mason slipped away, leaving me with more questions than answers. As the days wore on, the hostility became increasingly palpable. Sideways glances and hushed whispers trailed me wherever I went. Even the simple task of grabbing groceries felt like running a gauntlet of scorn and suspicion. Didn't think we'd be seeing another Weston round these parts. The checkout clerk's sneer sent a chill down my spine as she shoved my bags across the counter. I mustered a tight smile, my fingers digging into the paper handles. I'm just trying to restore what's mine. Her laugh was a harsh bark. That's what they all say, ain't it? Just be careful you don't end up like the rest of 'em. The cryptic warning hung in the air long after I'd left the store, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a hornet's nest of buried secrets and bitter grudges. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a dusty journal tucked away in the attic that the pieces began to fall into place. The yellowed pages revealed a sordid tale of betrayal and revenge, detailing a long-standing feud between my great-aunt and the town's most prominent family, the Harlows. Apparently, their discord ran deeper than mere bad blood. There were accusations of theft, sabotage, and even violence. As I pored over the crinkled entries, a knot of dread twisted in my gut. What had my great-aunt done to incur such wrath? And what role did the Harlows play in this twisted saga? The answers, it seemed, lay buried beneath decades of lies and deception. But I was determined to unearth the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. The journal entries painted a sordid picture, a twisted web of deceit and depravity that had entangled my family for generations. Nights were spent poring over the crinkled pages, my stomach churning with each new revelation. According to the faded scrawl, the Harlows were once our closest allies. United by wealth and status, the two families held an iron grip over Ridgeview's economy and social circles. But a scandalous affair between Jonathan Weston, my great-uncle, and Margaret Harlow shattered that bond forever. The betrayal ignited a feud that raged for decades, each family dealing brutal blows through underhanded business deals, character assassinations, and even outright sabotage. I always knew them Weston's was bad news. Mason's gravelly voice made me jump as he emerged from the shadows of the attic. Can't be trusted, the lot of 'em. I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. You knew about all this? He shrugged, a twisted smirk playing on his thin lips. Everyone in this town knows, Miss Weston. We just didn't figure you'd be dumb enough to come snooping around. White-hot anger flared in my chest as the truth sank in. Mason had been stringing me along this entire time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My hands trembled as I held up the damning evidence. So, what? The Harlows put you up to this? Keep me distracted while they plan their next move? His laugh was a hollow rasp that raised the hairs on my arms. Got a smart mouth on ya, don't ya? We'll see how long that lasts once the truth comes out. Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and disappeared, leaving me alone with the weight of my family's sordid legacy. The journal entries grew increasingly disturbing, detailing bitter rivalries, shattered lives, and dark deeds committed in the name of vengeance. It seemed no sin was too vile, no betrayal too unforgivable in the never-ending quest to destroy the other. But the final entry stopped me cold, a hastily scrawled confession of an unforgivable act, one that could very well be the key to unraveling this whole twisted saga. My great-aunt had orchestrated the framing and wrongful imprisonment of Simon Harlow, the family patriarch, over allegations of embezzlement and fraud. The evidence was damning, but according to her shaky scrawl, it had all been fabricated, a cruel lie spun from jealousy and malice. Simon Harlow had languished in prison for nearly a decade, his name and legacy dragged through the mud, all because of my family's treachery. The journal slipped from my trembling hands as the full weight of our sins crashed over me like a tidal wave. I knew then that I could no longer sit idly by and let this bitter feud consume what little remained of my family's honor. It was time to make amends, no matter the cost. After the sickening revelations found in those tattered journals, I knew I couldn't trust anyone in this God-forsaken town, especially not that wretched snake, Mason. The walls were closing in, and I needed an ally, someone to help me unravel this twisted web before it suffocated me completely. That's when I met Eliza Caldwell. I first encountered the wizened local historian at Ridgeview's modest library, her delicate frame hunched over a battered tome. She regarded me with open curiosity as I browsed the stacks, her rheumy eyes studying me from behind thick spectacles. "You must be the new Weston," she said, her voice a lilting rasp. "I can't recall the last time I saw one of your kin round these parts." I bristled at her casual mention of my family's name, memories of Mason's cruel taunts still fresh. "I'm just here to settle my great-aunt's affairs." A wry smile tugged at Eliza's thin lips. "Is that so? Well, you've got your work cut out for you, that's for sure." Before I could respond, she gestured to the cramped study carrel beside her, its surface littered with faded photographs and crinkled documents. "Why don't you have a look at these? Might shed some light on your situation." What I discovered in those dusty archives nearly made my heart stop, a decades-old paper trail detailing a bitter land dispute between the Westons and Harlows. Deeds were forged, property was seized, and livelihoods were ruined, all in the name of petty rivalry. But it was the final document, a tattered arrest record, that truly turned my blood to ice. Simon Harlow, charged with racketeering and fraud on suspiciously flimsy evidence. 10 years in a federal penitentiary, a once respected businessman left destitute and disgraced. My hands trembled as the horrible truth sank in. The cards had been stacked against him from the very beginning, a cruel vengeance plot orchestrated by none other than my own flesh and blood. Your great-aunt was a real piece of work, wasn't she? Eliza's voice cut through my stupor, her gaze knowing. Nobody crosses a Weston without paying the price. I slumped back in my seat, sick realization churning in my gut. How could one family inflict so much pain and suffering? Eliza's bony hand rested atop mine, her touch surprisingly gentle. That's the thing about grudges, my dear. They have a way of consuming us from the inside out until there's nothing left but bitterness and regret. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. For far too long, the Harlows had borne the brunt of my family's treachery and malice. It was time to right those wrongs, no matter the cost. Help me, I pleaded, gripping Eliza's hand with newfound determination. Help me put an end to this. Her steely gaze softened, a glimmer of respect flickering behind her spectacles. With a resolute nod, she sealed our fragile alliance. The reckoning was coming, whether Ridgeview was ready or not. With Eliza's help, the pieces were finally falling into place. We pored over those damning archives for hours on end, the bitter taste of betrayal souring my mouth with each new revelation. The more we uncovered, the deeper the Harlows' grievances against my family ran. Extortion, sabotage, character assassination. No low was too base when it came to ruining their hated rivals. And at the center of it all was Mason, that wretched snake who'd wormed his way into my confidences only to betray me at the first opportunity. He's been in the Harlows' pockets this whole time, Eliza growled, slamming a faded dossier onto the table. Feeding them information, stoking the feud to keep those old wounds fresh. My blood boiled at the thought of that traitorous weasel misleading me for his own nefarious agenda. We have to stop him, expose what he and the Harlows have been up to once and for all. Eliza's steely gaze met mine, a grim determination hardening her wizened features. Oh, we'll do more than that, my dear. By the time we're through, every last one of those bastards will get what's coming to them. As if on cue, a thunderous crash echoed through the manor, the walls trembling beneath the force of the impact. I raced to the foyer, my heart pounding, only to find the front door hanging askew on its hinges, the heavy oak splintered and cracked. Shards of broken glass crunched beneath my feet as I ventured further inside, dread coiling in my gut. Another resounding crash made me jump, followed by the deafening shriek of rending metal. I rounded the corner to find the once immaculate parlor in shambles, furniture overturned and priceless heirlooms strewn about like discarded trash. And there, amidst the wreckage, stood Mason, flanked by two burly thugs in workmen's coveralls. A sadistic grin split his weathered face as he brandished a crowbar, its dull metal glinting in the dim light. "Renovations are going a mite slower than expected," he sneered. "Thought we'd pick up the pace a bit." White-hot rage surged through me as I took in the wanton destruction, the pieces finally clicking into place. You did this? On the Harlows' orders?" "Give the girl a prize," Mason cackled, twirling the crowbar idly. "Can't have you sticking that pretty little nose where it don't belong. We had an agreement, see? You keep your head down and we let you keep on breathing." Eliza hurried to my side, her face pale with fury. "You'll pay for this, you miserable wretch, all of you." Mason's laughter was a harsh bark that raised the hairs on my arms. "Is that so? I'd like to see you try, you withered old—" "Enough!" The words tore from my throat in a savage growl. Trembling with rage, I snatched up a heavy bronze candlestick from the floor, leveling it at the traitorous cur like a weapon. "Get out," I seethed through gritted teeth. "Get out now while you still can." For a long moment, Mason simply stared at me, that twisted smirk slowly fading from his face. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, signaling for his goons to withdraw. "Have it your way, Miss Weston," he spat, venom dripping from his words. "But this ain't over. Not by a long shot." As they skulked away, the weight of his menacing promise hung in the air like a cancer. I knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that there would be no turning back. No more games. No more deceptions. Only the reckoning that had been so long in coming. The wreckage in the parlor was like a war zone, a harsh reminder of just how far the Harlows were willing to go to protect their rotten lies. My hands trembled with rage as I surveyed the devastation, centuries of history reduced to scattered ash and splintered wood. Eliza's wizened face was pale, her eyes flashing with determination. "We can't let them get away with this." I nodded, my jaw set. "They won't. It's time we brought this whole sordid affair into the light once and for all." Thanks to our tireless research, we had more than enough evidence to expose the Harlows and their bootlicking worm, Mason. Doctored deeds, forged contracts, eyewitness accounts of bribery and extortion. It was all there, a damning paper trail that would finally bring their reign of terror crashing down. As night fell, I gathered the most incriminating documents into a leather satchel, heart pounding in my chest. "Send word to the mayor. Tell him there's to be an emergency town hall meeting first thing tomorrow morning." Eliza arched a grizzled brow. "You aim to air our dirty laundry for the whole town to see? My, you are a bold one." My grip tightened on the satchel strap. They've been lying and cheating their way through life for far too long. It's past time someone finally yanked back the curtain and showed them for what they really are. A ghost of a smile tugged at Eliza's lips. "And here I thought you were just another entitled Weston looking to reap what your ancestors had sown. Clearly I underestimated you." With a curt nod, she turned on her heel and strode away, no doubt to set our daring plan into motion. My body thrummed with nervous energy as I waited for daybreak, pacing restlessly through the ravaged manor. Would the town believe my accusations? Or would the Harlows' their deep-seated influence prevail once more? So many years of deception and treachery had festered like an open wound. Was I about to pour salt straight into it? The first rays of sunlight were just cresting the horizon when a sharp rap echoed through the foyer. I pulled open the door to find Mason leering at me from the cracked stoop, a self-satisfied sneer twisting his leathery features. "You just had to go poking your nose where it didn't belong, didn't you, Missy?" He shook his head in mock regret. "And here I tried to go easy on you." From behind his back, he produced a crinkled document purportedly bearing my great-aunt's signature, passing it over to me. "See for yourself. By the lawful terms laid out here, you're to vacate the premises immediately and surrender all claim to this land and property. Failure to comply means the authorities will be getting involved." My hands shook as I scanned the document, that same white-hot rage boiling in my veins. It was a blatant forgery, an amateurish attempt to strong-arm me out of my rightful inheritance. "This is a lie," I spat, crumpling the document and flinging it back in Mason's face. "An obvious deception, just like everything else you pathetic cowards have put forth." The venom in my words seemed to catch the wretched man off guard. For a brief moment, genuine fear flickered in those beady eyes before the mask of smug arrogance slipped back into place. "Have it your way, then." He turned and made his way back to the battered truck, idling on the cracked drive. "Just remember, you were warned." His parting words hung bitter in the salty air as I watched him pull away, that righteous anger slowly hardening into grim determination. The Harlows and their ilk had held this town in an iron grip for far too long, using lies and intimidation to consolidate their twisted power. But not anymore. The reckoning was finally at hand. The rickety town hall was packed to the rafters, a low murmur of confusion and unease buzzing through the crowd as Ridgeview's residents filtered in. I could feel their eyes boring into me, a heady mix of suspicion and morbid curiosity. Eliza shot me a sidelong glance, her wrinkled brow arched. "Second thoughts?" I clutched the worn leather satchel tight to my side, my jaw set. Not a chance. It's long past time these people learn the truth. As the last few stragglers found their seats, Mayor Tillman rapped his gavel against the podium, calling the meeting to order. Basking in the heavy silence, I rose to my feet, heart thundering in my ears. "People of Ridgeview, I come before you today with evidence of a great deception, a web of lies and treachery spun by two families locked in an endless cycle of hatred and vengeance." A hushed ripple of muttering washed over the crowd, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. From the back row, a familiar, grizzled face sneered at me. Mason and his Harlow masters, no doubt expecting me to slink away in disgrace. Not this time. For generations, the Westons and Harlows have engaged in bitter feuds fueled by greed, jealousy, and malice. I produced a sheaf of documents from the satchel, letting them flutter to the floor in a ragged cascade. Property was stolen, lives were ruined, all in the name of settling petty scores, laying the foundations for the con that has gripped this town in fear for far too long. A heavy-set man in a grease-stained shirt shot to his feet, face ruddy with outrage. "That's a damn lie, Weston. Your family's been pulling heists and scams ever since you lot crawled out of the mud." Chaos erupted, angry shouts and profanities hurled like daggers. The mayor pounded his gavel, imploring for order, but the mob had already reached a fever pitch. Reckoning be damned, it seemed. I had gravely underestimated the depth of the town's hatred for my family's legacy. Just as I began to doubt the futility of my mission, a familiar, reedy voice cut through the din. "That's quite enough out of you lot." Eliza shouldered her way to the front of the hall, a defiant light blazing in those rheumy eyes. Leaning heavily on her cane, she produced a stack of weathered documents, slamming them onto the podium with startling force. "Miss Weston speaks the truth. Everything from forged deeds and extortion schemes to outright perjury and character assassination, all of it meticulously orchestrated by the Harlows to line their own pockets at the expense of their rivals." The hall fell into a stunned hush, every eye riveted on the frail old woman standing tall before them. With trembling hands, Eliza held up a sepia-toned photograph, the image of a grim-faced man in a tattered prison uniform searing itself into my memory. "Simon Harlow," she proclaimed, her voice thick with contempt. "Wrongfully imprisoned for a decade on falsified charges of racketeering, all thanks to the vile machinations of Kira's great-aunt. A good man's life ruined in the name of petty grudges and shameful greed." A chorus of gasps and muttered denials washed over the crowd, the raw truth of Eliza's damning revelations chipping away at the foundations of their reality. Through it all, the Harlows remained conspicuously silent, their arrogant sneers slowly melting away. At last, the evidence was laid bare before Ridgeview. The generations of corruption, duplicity, and outright criminality they had wallowed in, for the sake of lining their pockets, exposed in its ugly, unvarnished glory. I turned to face the shriveled husk that was Mason, fresh glee bubbling up in my chest. "Well, any other lies or forgeries you'd care to share with the group?" His face had gone an ashy gray, all swagger and bravado drained away in the wake of our courtroom coup. Slumping in his chair, he simply shook his head, lips pressed into a grim line. At long last, I realized the man had nothing left to say. The reckoning had finally arrived. The weeks following that explosive town hall were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, public hearings, and long-overdue reckonings. One by one, the Harlows' duplicitous deeds were laid bare before the courts, their criminal empire of lies and subterfuge crumbling to dust. Matriarch Constance Harlow was first to face justice, led away in handcuffs on charges of tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering. Her smug veneer had finally cracked, revealing the small, pathetic woman cowering beneath all those ill-gotten riches. The remaining Harlow progeny soon followed, convicted of everything from bribery to outright sabotage. Even their most zealous allies were implicated in the ever-widening scandal, with Weasley Mason getting his long-overdue comeuppance on conspiracy and perjury charges. Through it all, I remained steadfast, testifying tirelessly to ensure every last truth was dragged into the harsh light of day. It was a soul-scouring process, reliving those wretched feuds and betrayals over and over again, but a necessary purging if Ridgeview had any hope of healing. With each damning verdict, I could feel the town's wounds beginning to knit, the sour taint of corruption steadily lifting like a noxious fog. Of course, the most deep-seated scars would likely never fully heal, but for the first time in living memory, there was a chance for something better. The night the final Harlow crony was carted off in chains, I gathered with Eliza on the renovated Manor's terrace, clinking glasses of crisp white wine as the last rays of twilight caressed the salty air. "Well, that's that, I suppose." The wry historian's eyes twinkled over the rim of her glass. "No more dark family secrets to drag into the open, no bitter vendettas to unravel. Whatever shall we do with all our free time?" I couldn't help but laugh, savoring the simple joy of the moment, a simple pleasure that had been denied me for far too long. I don't know about you, but I could use a break from uncovering any more generational sins or bringing down corrupt dynasties. Eliza arched an owlish brow. "Is that your way of saying you'll be leaving us, Miss Weston?" Can't say I'm surprised. Lord knows this town gave you every reason to hightail it out of here once the dust settled. Pausing to take another sip, I let my gaze drift out over the immaculate grounds, emotion swelling in my chest. This ramshackle relic that had once represented everything broken about my family legacy was now a point of pride, a symbol of our tenacity and perseverance in the face of those who sought to tear us down. Actually, I was thinking of staying put for a while. I favored the dear old woman with a warm smile. Someone has to keep this place standing, after all we've been through to restore it. And besides... I spread my arms, gesturing to the bustling streets beyond the Manor's ivy-wreathed gates. I think Ridgeview and I might just have a second chance here. Eliza regarded me for a long moment, those rheumy eyes alight with something akin to wonder. Then, inclining her glass in a silent toast, she let a sly grin crease her weathered features. Well, I'll be damned. Looks like the Westons just might have produced a good egg after all. The twilight breeze carried her dry chuckle through the crisp evening air, banishing the last vestiges of darkness from this hard-won new beginning. For too long, the bitter feud between the Westons and Harlows had poisoned this town, mirroring it in a quagmire of hatred and pain. But those days were finally behind us. A new dawn was breaking over Ridgeview, and as I took my first unfettered breath of that fresh, salty air, I knew I was finally home.